Welcome, friends, and today I'm going to tell you the story of a girl who overcomes adversity and bullying to find love, purpose, and a happy destiny. Enjoy the story. Nina Peterson stared out the window of her senior homeroom class at George Washington High, watching happy couples stroll hand in hand through the sunny courtyard. Laughter and excited chatter about prom dresses, college plans, and spring break trips to Cancun filled the air. But Nina felt isolated from it all, trapped in a bubble of poverty and secondhand sweaters. The last time she'd had a new outfit was the first day of first grade, when Daddy was still Daddy, before Mom's accident, before everything fell apart. Now it was all she could do to keep her threadbare clothes clean and ignore the constant giggles and whispers behind her back. Especially from Brittany Thompson, reigning Queen Bee of the senior class, who now sauntered up to Nina's desk with a smirk. "Yo, Nina, I'm collecting donations for the homeless shelter downtown. Gonna toss in that dingy old rag you're wearing?" The room erupted in laughter as Nina's face burned. She grabbed her ratty backpack and bolted for the door, blinking back tears. "Nina, you come back here right now!" Mrs. Johnson's stern voice called after her. But Nina was already sprinting down the empty hallway, bursting through the heavy metal doors into the blinding sunlight. Chest heaving, she slowly walked the 10 blocks to the tiny apartment she shared with her dad. Hands shaking, she fumbled with her key and let herself in. The stench of stale beer and cigarette smoke assaulted her nostrils. Her eyes adjusted to the dim light, and she saw him passed out on the couch, surrounded by empty bottles and overflowing ashtrays. This was how she found him most days after school, ever since Mom died, and he'd lost his accounting job. Nina quickly got to work cleaning up his mess, a task as familiar to her as brushing her teeth. She collected the bottles, wiped the sticky surfaces, and opened a window to let in some fresh air. A sigh escaped her. "Daddy, you can't keep living like this." A grunt came from the couch and one bloodshot eye cracked open. "Nina, that you, baby? What are you doing home so early?" "It's 3 p.m., Dad." Nina perched on the arm of the sofa. "I left school. The kids were picking on me again, because of how I dress, because we're poor." Her voice cracked. "Oh, honey." He struggled to sit up. "I'm so sorry. I'm a failure as a father. You deserve so much better than—" "Stop, just stop." Nina stood abruptly. "I can't deal with this right now. I need some air." She grabbed her jacket and hurried out, ignoring her dad's pleas for her to stay. Blinded by tears, she stumbled down the cracked sidewalk, finally collapsing on a graffitied bench in front of their building. Sobs racked her body as she buried her head in her hands. She didn't even notice the gentle hand on her shoulder at first. "Nina, honey, what's wrong?" a kind voice asked. Nina looked up into the concerned face of Mrs. Thompson, who worked at a health clinic nearby. The story came pouring out, the bullying, her dad's drinking, how much she missed her mom. Mrs. Thompson listened patiently, occasionally laying a comforting hand on Nina's knee. "Have you talked to your principal about the bullying?" Mrs. Thompson asked when Nina finally ran out of words. "I'm sure they could," Nina laughed bitterly. "Principal Adams? He's so far up Brittany's dad's you-know-what. He'd probably give her a medal for most creative insults." "No, I'm not going back there." Mrs. Thompson nodded slowly. "I understand. You know, we're a bit short-handed at the hospital, especially for evening shifts. If you're interested in a part-time job—" Nina's eyes widened. A job meant money. Money meant no more second-hand clothes, no more mocking, and most importantly, no more school. She'd be 18 next week anyway. "That would be amazing, Mrs. Thompson." Mrs. Thompson smiled. "Come by tomorrow, and we'll get you set up. But Nina, promise me you'll at least consider staying in school. You're such a bright girl. I'd hate to see you throw away your future." Nina looked away. "I'll think about it," she said, knowing she wouldn't. The part-time night shift quickly turned into full-time. Nina threw herself into her work, grateful for the distraction from thoughts of school and her dad, and the $8 an hour. But her resolve faltered when she saw the shiny posters showing up all over town advertising a night to remember. Prom. Despite everything, a small part of her still yearned to go, to wear a gorgeous gown and slow dance under twinkling lights. Even if just for one night, to feel pretty, to feel normal. When she tentatively brought up the idea to Mrs. Thompson, her kindly boss immediately offered to tailor Nina's hours that week so she could attend. Buoyed by her support, Nina decided to take the plunge. She signed up, ignoring the snickers from Brittany and her crew. She saved every cent of her paychecks, comparing thrift store options online, determined to find something acceptable. She knew she'd never outshine Brittany, but she could at least avoid being openly mocked. It was her own form of armor. One night, a week before the prom, Nina was mopping the hospital's pediatric ward floors when a wail caught her attention. She poked her head in to see a young boy, 7 or 8 years old, with a bandaged head, wailing while a woman, presumably his mom, cried hysterically. "You have to keep this quiet," the woman shrieked. "If Ethan finds out Liam fell on my watch, he'll be taken out custody for sure." The boy, Liam, cried harder. Nina winced in sympathy. Just then, the on-call doctor strode up, took one look at the scene, and turned to Nina. "Please get that woman out of here. She's upsetting the patient. And page the father." "Yes, doctor." Nina guided the still sobbing woman into the hall as gently as she could. "Ma'am, what's going on? Is there anything I can do to help?" The woman sucked in shuddering breaths. "I'm Olivia, Liam's nanny. His father is Ethan Davison, the real estate mogul. I've worked for him for 5 years, since his ex abandoned them when Liam was just a baby." She lowered her voice. "Lydia, Liam's mom, recently filed for custody out of nowhere, probably looking for a payout. She has a history of drug problems. Ethan's going to flip out when he hears about this accident. He might fire me, or worse." Nina nodded, feeling a rush of sympathy for the little boy and his father. "Let me talk to Mr. Davison first," she said, guiding Olivia to a chair. "I'll explain the situation. Maybe we can figure something out." Olivia gave her Ethan's number with shaking hands. Nina took a deep breath and dialed. A deep, somewhat harried male voice answered. "Ethan Davison." "Mr. Davison, this is Nina Peterson calling from County Hospital. I'm afraid there's been a small accident with your son Liam." "What? Is he okay? What happened?" Ethan demanded. In soothing tones, Nina explained about Liam's fall from a scooter and minor concussion. "He's fine, sir, just a couple stitches, but given the situation with his mother, your nanny is concerned about this getting out." Ethan sighed, sounding weary. "Of course she is. Lydia will use any excuse to—" "Never mind. You're right, this needs to stay quiet. What do you suggest?" Nina bit her lip. This was way above her pay grade, but the desperation in Ethan's voice tugged at her heart. "Well, my shift ends in an hour. I could bring Liam and Olivia to my place, just until things blow over. No one would look for them there." A long pause. "You'd do that for us? For complete strangers?" Ethan asked finally. "I don't even know what to say." "Say yes," Nina said firmly. "It's the right thing to do." After hashing out the details and promising to stay in touch, Nina hung up. What was she doing? Inviting these people to the apartment? Her father was probably passed out drunk in the living room. But as she gathered Liam's discharge papers, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. This was her chance to help someone else for a change. Her prom dress could wait. An hour later, Nina unlocked the apartment door with trepidation, praying her dad was at least conscious. To her shock, the living room was spotless. No bottles, no cigarette butts. The sour odor was gone too, replaced by the mouth-watering aroma of baked chicken. "Dad?" she called, ushering Olivia and a sleepy Liam inside. Bert Peterson poked his head out of the kitchen, looking more put together than Nina had seen him in years. Shaved, clean shirt, clear eyes. "Welcome home, honey." His eyes widened when he saw Nina's guests. She rushed to explain in a low voice. "It's a long story, Dad. They just need to stay tonight until it's safe for them to go home." To Nina's surprise, her dad just nodded. "I understand. I'm just about to take the chicken out. You and your friends wash up." Too shocked to argue, Nina showed Olivia and Liam to the tiny bathroom before confronting her father. "Dad, what? How?" Bert took her hands, his eyes shining. "Sweetheart, I heard what you said the other day about how I'm failing you. And you're right. I haven't been a father since your mom, but I'm going to change that, starting now. I called my old boss, begged for my job back. He agreed. I start Monday." Tears streamed down Nina's face as she hugged him fiercely. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. He squeezed her tight. "I'm proud of you too, honey. I know how hard you've been working. Speaking of—" He pressed a wad of bills into her hand. "This is for you, for your prom dress. I know it's not much, but the guys at work collected contributions when they found out my little girl was going to prom." Nina stared at the money in disbelief. There had to be at least $400 here. She could get a real dress. New shoes, too. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll take lots of pictures for your old man." Bert smiled. "Now round up our guests. Dinner's getting cold." The day of the prom arrived in a blur. True to her word, Mrs. Thompson had altered Nina's schedule and even slipped her a $50 bill for whatever pretty girls need on prom night. Nina felt like she was walking on air. She was just about to leave for her hair appointment when she got a text from an unknown number. "I'm sending a car for you tonight. Be ready at 7. You won't be going to prom alone. Ethan." Nina's heart raced. Ethan was coming to her prom? But why? They'd texted a bit since that night last week, but she didn't think... She shook her head. "Focus, Nina." At 6:45, Nina stood nervously in the living room, hardly recognizing her reflection. Her golden hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders. Her deep blue gown hugged her curves in all the right places. She looked beautiful. Even her dad teared up when he saw her. At 7 on the dot, a gleaming black town car pulled up. The driver opened the door and out stepped Ethan in a perfectly tailored tux, followed by Liam in his own miniature version. Nina's heart stuttered. Ethan's eyes widened when he saw her. "Wow, you look... wow." Nina blushed. "What are you doing here?" Ethan smiled. "Making sure one of the most selfless people I've ever met gets the prom night she deserves." Liam ran up for a hug. "Miss Nina, you're like a princess. Don't worry, me and Daddy will make sure no one is mean to you tonight." Her eyes stung, and she quickly blinked back tears. "Then we better get going." The mood was electric when they arrived at the decorated gym, music pounding. Ethan slipped an arm around Nina's waist, leading her through the crowd of whispering, staring students, while Liam proudly held her other hand. "Who does she think she is?" Brittany's voice cut through the noise. Nina turned to see her rival gaping open-mouthed, some jock's arm slung around her shoulders. But before Brittany could say more, Mrs. Johnson appeared. "Well, don't you look lovely, Nina? And this must be your dashing date." She shook Ethan's hand. She turned to Brittany with a sweet smile. "Doesn't Nina look beautiful, Brittany? It's so wonderful to see our students overcome adversity and shine." Brittany sputtered, her face flushing an unattractive purple. With an angry huff, she tore off her prom queen sash, threw it to the ground, and stormed out of the gym. Mrs. Johnson winked at Nina. "You just focus on having a wonderful time, honey. You've earned it." With that, she melted back into the crowd of students, all of whom were now clamoring to meet Nina's mystery man. The rest of the night passed in a happy daze for Nina, dancing with Ethan, laughing with new friends, posing for pictures. She felt like she'd stumbled into someone else's fairy tale, and she never wanted it to end. It was near midnight when Ethan pulled her aside, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Nina, there's something I need to tell you. These past few days, texting with you tonight, I haven't felt this way about anyone in a long time." Nina's heart pounded as Ethan grasped her hands. "I know our lives are very different, but I'd like to see where this could go if you're willing. Liam adores you and I'm falling for you." He took a shaky breath. "Am I crazy?" Nina touched his cheek, a smile blooming on her face. "If you're crazy, then I'm crazy too, because I'm falling for you too, Ethan. Let's figure it out together." He kissed her then. A kiss filled with promise and possibility, the perfect end to a perfect night. Nina knew, as they swayed to the final song, her future was just beginning. And as long as she had Ethan and Liam by her side, as long as her dad stayed sober, anything was possible. The applause was deafening as Nina stepped off the podium, her valedictory speech complete. In the audience, her dad wiped away a proud tear, while 10-year-old Liam cheered, "Go, Mom!" Ethan wrapped his new bride in his arms and whispered, "I love you, my brilliant wife." Just 3 years removed from the prom night that changed her life, Nina had accomplished more than she'd ever dreamed. She'd graduated top of her class and now ran a nonprofit helping underprivileged kids access education and job opportunities. She and Ethan were that couple, the ones who radiated love and joy, a united force that adapted against any challenges thrown their way. Through their commitment to helping others and to each other, they'd found their happily ever after. Nowadays, Nina only thought of her difficult past when choosing her wedding gown. Standing in the bridal salon, she was surprised to find Brittany as her consultant. Her former nemesis looked her up and down before frowning. "Let me guess, you're looking for something cheap and off the rack? The thrift store is down the street." Nina smiled serenely. "On second thought, I think we'll take our business elsewhere. I prefer to work with people who don't bully teenage girls for being less privileged." She took Ethan's hand and walked out, her head held high. They found her dream gown at the next boutique. As Nina twirled in the beautiful white creation, she reflected on how far she'd come, how different her life was now. She caught Ethan's adoring gaze in the mirror and smiled. This was her happily ever after, and she wouldn't change one moment of her journey in getting here.